Okay. Just sharing my screen here. Can you all see that?
We can.
Okay. And we'll go in and before I start, I should say that uh, getting here, get it up there properly. That if you came back and you've heard the first three, you are definitely a glutton for punishment. And I'm not sure about the positive influence. You could see what some people will say the negative influence. So you have to go from one place to another. But today I'll talk to you about the Rotary Marketplace, which is actually the farmers marketplace and a new community center actually downtown, which is the bottom line to this. I'll start off before I get into the real slides and kind of showing you the evolution of the project itself. I'll give you some background on it. When I think all of you are familiar enough with Rotary itself in the community, and in 29, no, it would be 2020. In January of 2020, the way it works in the downtown Yakima Rotary Club is that the current board of the Rotary group gets together, and then they look at all the candidates that are eligible to be president in not the coming year, but the year after that. So that would be, I was selected in January of 2020, which meant that my term would be 21-22, from July 1st, 21 to June 30th, 22. And the way it works is they all meet, and then once they decide, after having been on this group, after a quite usually liquid infused dinner somewhere, you choose and they select, and then they show up at that person's house unannounced at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night and tell you you are invited to be the next Rotary president. And at that point, it's a little hard to say no. So the one perk about that, or the two perks that you get if you are the president of the club, is one is you get to go to the international conference, which is paid for by the club, which was to be in Taipei, Taiwan. And the second thing is you get to choose a project. Well, the first part ended up not happening because we had a little pandemic, just a minor little blip in the health of the nation. And so the conference was canceled, but I still got to pick a project. And there are 3 Rotary clubs in town, and each club president can pick their own project, or what has been happening in recent years is the 3 go together and pick a joint project because you can pool more money and therefore do a larger project. Well, we talked about some number of things. A lot of the things that have been done prior to this by the Rotary president had to do with athletics and playgrounds and things to do with things in the city parks. And so we thought, well, let's do something different. And so we had this idea that perhaps we could build a permanent structure for the farmers market. We are the center of agriculture, and we could do something. And then so we agreed that that would be what we would do. And then it came to the point that we would have to decide where that was going to go. And the best place that we thought was the home of the former Track 29. And I think all of you have probably been around long enough to know that that was located right on West Yakima Avenue, right to the west of the railroad tracks, across the railroad tracks from the train station. That property, from the very beginning of the city of Yakima, had been occupied by the rail station. Originally, our first rail station was actually located right at the head of Yakima Avenue, right where the tracks cross Yakima Avenue now. And because Yakima Avenue did not proceed west, it stopped right at the tracks. They later moved it over, and then there were a couple stations, and finally the current station and freight house were built in 1910. But the property there to the west of the tracks was occupied by, over the next years, by a whole variety of both rail yards and rail associated freight buildings. There had been a number of buildings there, and they also, those warehouses, which are on the left of your screen, were actually all fruit warehouses went around, and a lot of them were cold storage and processing places because the fruit would be brought in from the orchards, packed, and then would be shipped out on rail cars there. And there were often conveyor belts that would run ice and fruit under the railroad tracks and over the tracks, so you could load the freight cars, the railroad cars from both sides. But over the years, that use became unused, and that property became just vacant. And it was used for, at first, for just nothing. And then John Edwards had the idea of moving some rail cars in and creating the Track 29 shopping center. Well, that had disappeared by the by the early 2000s, and really maybe a little later than that. But anyway, it was all gone, totally gone. And so we got the idea that maybe we could build a pavilion right down the middle of that, and because there was a grassy space there. And that is, in fact, what we thought we would do. Well, it turned out that all that property is now owned by what was then Memorial Hospital, now Multicare Memorial. And we would have to get permission from the hospital to do that, which they did. But the big problem was that they, number one, got into the same problem we all did with COVID, and we're on the front line. So they were really, really tied up. And then we also discovered that because that piece of property had always been basically transferred from owner to owner, all as kind of one great big land transaction, the piece that we wanted, which was running right down the middle, was actually located on 3 separate legal parcels and portions of 3 separate legal parcels. So one of the first things that had to be done was to figure out how to get that property into one parcel, and then to have them lease it, and to find out who would take on the lease. In this case, it turned out to be the Downtown Association of Yakima, which is also a 501c3 nonprofit, and already is responsible for maintenance of the flower baskets that hang downtown, and the flower pots, and some extra clean and safe stuff. So we finally got that done. It took actually almost 3 years to get that lease legally executed before we could start construction. But in the meantime, I engaged Rod Nipper from KDA Architecture to do some conceptual drawings for what we thought we could have it. And this was kind of the first, well, there were a number of plans, but this was kind of the first concept that we came up with, that he came up with. And then, of course, like all these things, is we thought, well, that's nice and whatnot, but can we make it look a little fancier? This is kind of the look of it from the side. Yakima Avenue is at your left, but we thought, well, we want to make it, look a little better. And so this was the design that we finally agreed upon. And if you will notice, which is kind of hard to tell because I don't have the other thing right up at the same time, but the way the brickwork is on these pillars is exactly the color and the way the brickwork is on the 1910 train station to its immediate east on the other side of the tracks. And in the process of getting this designed and working this all out, getting the legal description and whatnot, we also realized that this was going to be probably more than what the Rotary clubs normally put up to do this kind of project. The 3 Rotary clubs together put up $250,000 jointly. That's Sunrise Rotary, Southwest Rotary, and Downtown. And then the Rotary Trust, which is a separate agency, but handles kind of big projects. And it handles the scholarship money that we have from Molly Davis. Put in another $54,000. So we had $304,000. And it seems like a lot of money. It's just a big open pavilion. But our first estimates thought, well, it's probably going to cost more than that. So we ended up raising to date about $1.4 million to build this from a combination of sources, all private, and the Rotary clubs, and decided to go ahead. We broke ground. This is kind of from the side. And we also decided, because there were a whole variety of people involved, that we would have the Rotary members, the Rotary member Moen Construction, build the front part, and the back part would be built by a separate contractor, in this case, Tri-Ply Construction. And that was partly because there were two different groups, and each of them were really generous about, making it as affordable as possible. And then they each didn't take on the whole burden of donating, more than they really should have or wanted to. This is again the design look that it would look like from the Yakima Avenue. Again, you get a better sense of it here. We sense this town seems to be somewhat, I don't know what the right word is, but they're fixated on parking, even though there's usually plenty of parking. We were very careful that in the final analysis, we would not take any spaces away from the parking lot as it exists, with a possible exception of a couple right there at the front. Yakima Avenue is to your right, and this is how it runs down the street. We finally broke ground for this project in August of last year. So if you go back, we got the idea in the spring of 2020. We had almost 3 years of raising money, refining designs, getting the lease, just a lot of all kinds of issues. Because as it turned out, this property, not only was it all under one piece and had to be separated, but it also, the utilities and all the infrastructure was very, shall we say, mystical. There wasn't a lot of plans for what was there. But we finally were able to break ground in August of 2023, and work started almost immediately on the front pavilion. These are the building of the concrete columns, which were then going to be finished in brick. This is at the far north end, because the other thing that we wanted to create was two highly secure rooms into which we can use for both storage of equipment and whatnot for the market, and for all the controls for the water and the power that comes to this facility, so that it can be turned off when we're not in use, and it's not going to be always live, so to speak. And these are those rooms being built at the rear. This is the front part under construction. You can see they've gotten the brickwork done on some of the pillars, and they're wrapped and protecting them. The roof has been framed, but it's not yet waterproofed. And but you can see to the back, to the far left of your slide, the beginning of the shed building, what we call the shed building. And this building was actually pre-built and pre-engineered in St. Louis, shipped to California to be painted and finished, and then shipped here to be installed, put together somewhat like a jigsaw puzzle. We also wanted to use the basalt, and this is the basalt base, the base of each of those columns. And you can see how the bricks set back every several course. It's not quite as distinctive here as it is on the train station. And that's because in 1910, bricks were made solid. They didn't have a hole in the middle. Now bricks have 3 holes in the center. And so you can only bring them out so far before you expose the holes. And so you couldn't do quite as far a reveal as you could in 1910. This gives you some idea of all the work that had to go in underground. It had to be trenched. This is all the piping and conduit lines for power, water. There's not only water that will be used by the market and potable water, but then there's also irrigation water for flower beds up at the front and for some other uses at the property. So there was a lot of underground work that went into it. This gives you another idea of once the shed is being built. You can see it's all, as I say, a big jigsaw puzzle. Kind of fun to see it all come together. It's fun to see all those pieces, and they knew how to install them. And then this is the shed with the roof on it. You'll see the middle has translucent panels, which throws light into the center, even though there will be lights, electric lights, pendant lights that hang down there, which are not yet installed. In fact, I was just talking to them today about when they're coming. And you'll see on each pillar, there are outlets. That's what's on each one of those support posts, are outlets that are both regular power and 50 amp power. When you have food vendors and other kinds of things, they often need much more power than just a regular household circuit. And that's what you'll see there. There's also hose water sources all along the thing. And that was a lot of the reason for doing all this, was to create all this infrastructure. I think when you come to events downtown, or you see anything downtown and you see something happening, I don't think you really realize, most people don't realize, that there is not sufficient power or water access for all the vendors and all the uses down there. And a lot of it has to be brought in or kind of cobbled together from existing buildings. And so we created a whole new ability to do that. Then the floor of this pavilion and the whole thing, it was to be finished with pavers. And we decided, again, to save money and also to create a Rotary work project, that Rotarians would install these pavers. Well, the poor souls that decided this was a great idea didn't realize it was like 14,000 square feet and about 35 to 40,000 pavers, which had to be installed one at a time over the last several weeks. You'll be happy to say they are now finished. It is totally, all the pavers are done. What you see stacked there are the ones that have to go back. We didn't need them. And the project is really now essentially finished, except for a couple things. One is, obviously, the fence is going to go away. You'll see on the front, there are flower beds. There's one on either side. Those are going to get planted. We're having somebody work on that to come up with a design that's going to be as vandal resistant as possible. The other thing that is not done is there are hanging lights that go inside, in the middle, all the way down. And across the front, you'll see there's a grid that goes up there. And on that grid will be the signage that says Rotary Marketplace and the Rotary wheel, which has been custom made in neon. I love neon. So that's where that came from. That's the grid, the design of the grid that comes in. And it's designed also so that even though it looks like it blocks all the way across that, about where the porta potty is located, that's actually a drive-through. And you'll be able to drive through to the other side of that lot and use that for parking and whatnot. And if we don't, it's set up so that there are movable steel posts that go in there to close that off when we don't want it to be a drive-through. So you can see that's what it's turning out to be. The other thing that's not finished here is you'll notice that the roof of the front part, what we call the pavilion, looks a little dull, and it is to have actually clay tile, ceramic tile. And when this was designed and inaugurated, Wagner Roofing promised to give us the tile because they had enough left over from the roofing that they had done at the extension to First Presbyterian Church, which was the same kind of tile. When it turned out for us actually to do it, they didn't have as much as they thought they did. And to buy more ceramic tile is outrageously expensive. And so we opted to wait because it turns out that the tile roof that is now on the St. Elizabeth's Hospital School of Nursing, that building is to be rehabbed and turned into more housing and apartments for the YWCA domestic violence program. And that roof has to be replaced and rebuilt, and they cannot use those tiles again on the new roof. So there will be enough there to salvage and use on this roof. And the price on those is phenomenal because it'll be free. So that's probably not going to get done for another year, but it's mostly done. It has been, I will say, an extremely complicated project. It looks relatively simple, but it seems like there's been one thing after another on it, and I'm really looking forward to it being finished. We discovered only recently that it's going to cost even more than the $1.4 million that I've already raised. So I have a lot of friends who are trying to block my phone calls right now. But you all are since you all are hearing that, you're all game, for my last 300,000 that I have to find. But we're working on that right now. That's the thing. Again, I'm going backwards. Sorry. And the reason I threw this in is you may not be aware. I'd have to go back to the original slide, but this parking lot and where the marketplace is located actually extends all the way from Yakima Avenue to where the first underpass is of the railroad tracks. And it passes this building, which is at the end of the parking lot on the west side. And some of you may recognize this as the old Hellison Lumber Company building. This was actually built in 1906. Well, actually built earlier than that, kind of redone. And anyway, it's got a number of things done with it. But when the lumber yard moved out onto Washington, this building has been vacant since, except used for storage. And it's now owned by a private property owner here in town, not the Hellisons. And the Downtown Association has taken a lease on the building for 1 year to help ready it to see if we can turn it into a kind of an extension of the marketplace. It backs up to the same parking lot as the marketplace. And the idea would be that we'll put something in here that would have restrooms, would have perhaps some food facilities that are open year-round, and other space for year-round activities, as well as the Downtown Association office. And then I've already talked to the hospital, although they haven't yet agreed. But once all the front parking lot is open again, this back part of the lot is never used. And I'm hoping that ultimately that piece of property will become available for us to use as a green space and kind of connect to the marketplace. because the whole idea of the marketplace is not just to be the farmer's market, but it's also to be kind of a rejuvenation or kind of a central gathering spot downtown for all kinds of public activities that can use an outdoor space. Probably build a permanent stage down there, some other kinds of outdoor things, as well as having the indoor facility there in the outdoor marketplace. So it's kind of a big long-term dream, which I go after. And I said after I did marketplace, I wasn't doing any more projects, but it looks like I might. And as I said, I love neon, and that's what I was tell you one last thing about it. This is actually the marketplace as I hope it's going to look in maybe another year or two. And if you'll notice one thing that's different, number one, it has the lights in it, which it'll have pretty soon. But if you look to the left, you'll see there's kind of a abstract kind of piece of neon or light art that runs across the ridge of the top of the shed building. And that is under design right now. It's not yet funded, but we have made provision for it in the design to create a light sculpture that'll run 300 feet down there. Because my whole thought also on this is not only to make it a marketplace, but also kind of a community icon. And I love light and I love neon. And if we can get this to work, it may be neon. It also may be the modern, more contemporary tubular light art, but it will change color. It will actually create a whole area of kind of light and excitement and activity that will be there all the time, even if the market's not populated. And we hope it can be used for lots of different things. So I think my long-term summary is that the first thing is we thought it was going to be a great idea. We still think it's a great idea. We all agree we bit off slightly more than we thought we were biting off when we started. Turned out to be a lot more expensive a project and extensive and complicated, but it is close to being finished, with the exception of the light fixture, the light art, which we still haven't kind of found a source for yet. Opening is planned for June 25th. And then should be fully functional. It can be used for the market, which is on Sundays. It can be used for anything in the evenings or on weekends. We kind of have to give the hospital priority for parking during the weekday work hours, at least at the moment. But I'm hoping we can kind of negotiate that down the road, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. But hopefully we can make this a real asset for the community and something that people will use and enjoy for all kinds of different activities as the years progress. So, and at that point, I will answer questions.
Thank you, John. That's pretty darn fascinating. I'm sure there are people with questions, so unmute yourselves. And let's see, John, do you want to stop your screen share and then great. Go back to Deborah Ann.
Yeah. How's it going to be set up for the market? Are the vendors going to be on the outside facing in, or how?
Yes, they're going to be on the outside. They're going to run along the outside and the people will be in the middle. We actually, that's really, now that it's done, they're supposed to pave the east side of the parking lot either this Friday or next Monday. And as soon as that's paved, then we're going to go down there with vendor tents and whatnot and kind of work it all out. We've laid it all out on paper and whatnot, but there's a whole lot of different things, laying out on paper sometimes is the same as actually having it there. So, but so the public will be undercover.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, I can only see what you've been showing me, but going from having a wide street with vendors on the side, would it maybe overcrowd it going down the center? I don't know.
Well, we don't know. It's actually a lot wider than it kind
Is
of
it?
looks.
Okay.
And actually, now the market, which is on Third Street, we have vendors in the middle now. So they really don't have much more space to walk than they
Okay.
will on this. But you're right. I mean, it's a very good question, and we may have to send them out a little further. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you, John.
Yeah, and thanks for, all of these pictures of the complexities of it are very helpful. Dennis, you have a question.
I had a couple of comments. First, that I really value the Rotary. First, for the aquatic center is a tremendous asset, but this even more so because the downtown needs a pizzazz, an icon, and I think this is a start, especially John, when you talk about looking into that adjacent building to expand. I think I think that'll happen. It's going to be a grassroots start. It's going to, I think, develop into a lot of positive things. A couple of things. I'm worried about the homeless and the security of the structure. Has that been in play?
Oh yeah. It's been in play when we first started talking about it, and it's still in play. We don't know, truthfully. There certainly is concern that people will be under it, but one thing we have done is, number one, that there will be no power or water except when it's in use. So they'll have the cover, but they won't have the access to anything that is an attraction. The other thing that gives us a little bit of hope is that when we look at where the homeless have kind of congregated elsewhere downtown, it's been near where there are services for homeless, like on South Natchez Avenue. And there's very, very little once you get more than a block away from where the services are, there at the corner of Walnut and South Natchez. And there's no services up there for the homeless. So we're hoping that's another reason why there are no restrooms for it either. The worst case scenario, which is that we're fully prepared for the fact that we may have to have some security hired to deal with it if it becomes a problem. The Downtown Association will be the managers of it, and because once Rotary's done and it's paid for, then it gets turned over to the Downtown Association. And the Downtown Association already has a crew that does garbage, and we have homeless that we have move along and whatnot, but we're not there at night. And that might be where we might have to have somebody else there, but we'll just have to see how it plays out and whether in fact it is. Again, they tend not to congregate where there's a lot of activity. And during the day, there is a fair amount of activity there because you have the people parking there and whatnot all the time. So we'll just have to see if that plays out.
That's got to be dealt with it because that's it's disappointing to go in there and have urine and all kinds of stuff in that area. It's just it defeats it all. It's just sad. I know. Yeah,
I know. And we talked about it, but we thought, we can't let something might happen stop it. So I think we just have to learn to figure out how we're going to deal with it. And if we start to get it, we're just going to have to figure out how to keep it clean.
I missed where the restrooms at.
They're not in. They're not in there. We'll bring them in just like we do now, because if we put them there, we'd have the problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Public restrooms are a nightmare.
Yeah. Okay.
Are just a nightmare. Although, interestingly enough, there's some new ones that have been designed that are number one, they're timed. You can't stay in there. They time and they alarm. And then the other thing, which is even more important, is they also have a blue light system that you can't see your veins when you're in there, which is one of the reasons why public restrooms get trashed, is people go in there for drug use. And they're finding some success of those. We don't have them here in Yakima yet, but they're trying them in some other places to see if they can, if that'll help solve a problem.
I thought when you said they were timed, people got ejected out of the.
They alarm if they're in there too long. They alarm, and they it's very difficult, and you can't disable it. It's built into the structure of the unit, but they're expensive, and the question is whether in fact they would be worth or not. So we'll have to go with the same thing right now, at least for the moment, anyway. That was the other reason of getting the other building, is because then those restrooms would be inside, be locked. The building could be locked and monitored better.
The other thing that I think will help is that the only part of the building on the pavilion that has the pillars is in a highly trafficked area for tagging. The rest, the shed in the back doesn't have any place to write on.
Not very much, and we've actually graffitied. We've coated it, graffiti coated it,
Okay.
and the Downtown Association, we remove graffiti all the time. We have a program, and every time there's a tagging within our district downtown, because I'm also the treasurer of the Downtown Association. This is called
What
the
I mean,
kind of thing where incest is best kind of thing, where we're kind of connected all through. So,
John, you answered one of my questions, which was who was going to manage it. It's the Downtown Association. So
that's correct.
if people want to have events in there or want to use it, they work through the Downtown Association.
Right. We have a lease agreement, or a temporary lease, just like if you rented a picnic shelter on a city park. And there'll be a charge to use it, and some damage deposit and all that kind of stuff that you normally have.
And the other question I had was, are you thinking it's going to attract the same vendors, more vendors? Is there room for more vendors?
There is room for more vendors, and actually we're having a real problem right now, because more vendors know this is happening, and so we have more applications now than we can service where we are now on 3rd Street this year for the first time. And for 2 reasons we can have more vendors. One is there's just more length of space, but more importantly, and really because the length of space you could figure out, you just go in more blocks downtown. But what there isn't downtown is water and power, and we have water and power all along that, and different kinds of power and different kinds of water. We've worked with all these vendors because the Downtown Association runs the farmers market and has since 2017, I think, or 18, I can't remember which, but and so we know what they want and what they need, and so we're prepared to meet that, and we designed that all in there, so they'll have it. So that makes it more possible. Like right now, where there's certain food vendors and certain vendors that need refrigeration, so they need power when they're down at the farmers market, and there isn't power there for them, so we can't use them. We can only have a certain number of people with power because we have to pull the power for it off the Capitol Theater right now, and there's a limited amount that's available.
John, my question is along the same lines. It seems like we have 2 markets in Yakima, the downtown one, of course, and then the one at Union Gap. Is your new facility attracting that group away from Union Gap, and maybe you can have one united market now?
Yeah, I'll tell you the background of that. That's kind of a sad story in a way. The mall market is not very big, and and some of the vendors come to both, and some of the other ones only go down there, but they don't have very many vendors. It's very small. But it really shouldn't even exist, because what happened was the Farmers Market Association was a separate nonprofit, its own group, when it was started. here, at least in the last transformation, which was around 1999, 2000. And it ran pretty well for a while. But by about 12 or 13, it was beginning to struggle a lot with just the overall administration and the management of it. And it lost its nonprofit status. And it also, many of the vendors were abandoning it because they were not getting, they weren't being treated very well. And they weren't getting their, it's kind of a long, involved story, and I don't want to throw people under the bus, but I will throw only one entity under the bus. And so after the 2017 market or the 2016, I can't remember whichever one was the last one, the city would not give them a permit to run on 3rd Street anymore or anywhere in the city because they owed the city a fair amount of money for the permit fees over the years and all kinds of stuff. So the city is the one that came to the Downtown Association and said, would you take it on and would you run it? And we were not too thrilled about doing it. Not because we didn't feel it was something we could do. It's just that we had quite a lot on our plate already. And taking on a whole nother operation was going to be a big lift. But the city promised that they would get the equipment back from this organization because that equipment technically did not belong to the people who were running the last market. It belonged to the group that had kind of partially gone defunct, and that they would not allow it to be run elsewhere. Well, what the guy did is he took the equipment and then went to the mall management and the mall let him set up on the mall property with the old equipment. But then the mall in the last 2 years also got just enamored with that guy. And then they took it over to start to run it. And, whether it continues or not, I don't know. But okay. It's just kind of the nature of the way it is. And we're just going to keep going. I mean, just to give you some idea, we have now had 4 markets this year. And we sell anywhere from 30, let's see, because I do the books for the market also. And we don't get a percentage of the sales, but they have to report the sales to us because we have to, we're a certified market. The one in the mall is not. And because we're certified, that gives us certain benefits for certain kinds of support and logistical support. For example, one of the things that we can do a lot, which the other market cannot do nearly to the extent we can, is we can do an unlimited amount of people using their food stamps with a market match. So if you're getting food stamps, we can, let's say you take $50 off out of your food stamp allotment. We give you another $50 in market money that you can spend only at the farmer's market. So they, there's certain advantages they have to that. But anyway, the point is we have to know the sales because then we can report that, and that gives us because you have to have a certain percentage of sales that are farm, certain percentage of this or that one, just stay certified. And we sell anywhere from $30,000 to $43,000 a morning in goods each of these mornings. So,
wow.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty amazing.
Impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. How much, some of the vendors will sell $3,000 or $4,000 worth of product in a morning.
Interesting. Well, thanks for that explanation. That I hope they all come together.
Yeah. Well, so do we. I mean, but we figured we just gotta keep going and see what happens.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for your work on this, John. It's wonderful. I have to run and pick up soccer kids, so thanks so much.
Can't imagine.
I've safe.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Wow. Other questions?
Since our other project years ago for a public space fell through. This is just such a treat to see it happen.
Well, yeah, and I have to tell you that part of the reason for doing that is I was so disillusioned with the failure of that project.
Yeah,
And the fact that we had the money for it and everything, and then not to have it happen.
just got too political.
Yeah, well, yeah.
What are the parking challenges down there or possibilities?
Well, there's plenty of parking. I mean, downtown, it's even during the plaza arguments and whatnot. It was really kind of amazing because people, oh, I can't do that. I can't, it's going to be parked. Can't park that far away. And then you'd ask them how far they park to walk to Walmart, and it would be close. We'd be closer downtown. Even when they'd have fresh hop ale downtown, you could park within a couple blocks of the couple 2 blocks, couple 3 blocks of the where you wanted to be. But downtown, we seem to have this idea here that you got to be right in front of your store all the time. But this has a lot of parking because there is a lot of parking all around it in the lot itself. And another aspect of this, which I didn't even talk about, is that a disadvantage of that is that right now that lot's only accessible off Yakima Avenue. And we are looking at seeing if there's a way to get out to First Avenue from the back of the lot. There are some potential spots for it where there is not a building. We'll just have to see if we can do that. But again, it was kind of the whole idea. We're going to build this, and then we're going to work on that Helson building. We're going to work on an access to it. And we're just trying to make it happen. And one of the things I think about the plaza failure too is that I don't think anybody ever really realized that that was just step one in a much larger plan for downtown. There were other steps that were going to follow it that would have done a lot of that, but it just never would get through. And, it's just the way it goes. And this I did without public. I didn't have to go to the public for it, a public vote.
Yeah. Question about parking. Is there disabled parking? I mean, I'm sure you have it, but
Yeah.
is it at different locations in there or?
It's all up toward the front of the market right now, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't have more, add more.
It'd be nice to have it in different locations. I'm thinking, because I work at our booth sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
hopefully there'll be enough between what's a handicap and what's not that I'll be able to find a spot to park.
Oh, I think so. I think so. I think so. Because there's quite a few up at the front, and we can always add more if we need them. So again, it's going to be a little bit of a trial and error. The first few weeks, it's going to be a little messy, I'm sure, until we kind of get it organized.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's exciting.
John, Front Street has a lot of events. Is there some collaboration between your facility and Front Street to work together on different events?
Well, we hope so, because a lot of those events that are on Front Street are also run by the Downtown Association.
Oh, okay.
And we would like to move some of them into this pavilion. The catch is that some of them won't. We have to figure out whether, in fact, like Downtown Summer Nights is on a Thursday night. And while in the evening it's fine, are we going to have enough access before the event starts around the parking there at the lot? And it's kind of one of those things that I'm hoping we'll be able to negotiate with the hospital, but they're being really helpful already. And I don't want to push the, one request at a time. Yeah. But that is the hope that we can do that.
I could foresee that Front Street being a pedestrian pavilion to be a very nice accent too in the future. I hope something like that.
Well,
More
access. I want to go to the big dream. I want to do what Wenatchee did and build a bridge over the tracks, a pedestrian bridge over the tracks.
Right.
Wenatchee's done that, and it could easily be done there.
Okay.
But because the other piece there that I'm not sure all of you are aware, is that the jail, the lovely big white block there, is eventually going to have to be removed. It's got a whole number of problems, apparently, not just it's got some structural issues and infrastructure issues, but it's also kind of doesn't meet the standards and whatnot, and the county eventually is going to replace it. But so that lot then could become, you could make the whole thing a great big happy big
Mhm.
center,
Wow.
which I think would be great. But they'll, as I
Interesting.
said, a step at a time.
Well, with it just being back to back with Front Street, practically, like, you could have the musical event and have the parking spaces available, and there's just
Well, and we still could do that even for downtown summer nights, and we still do.
true.
A lot of people do still park there for downtown summer nights, so because that's in the evening. So
I can't wait to go.
yeah, well, me either. I can't wait until I can find
You've been waiting longer than I have.
it.
Well, what I want to know is when they've got to send you on some kind of international trip.
Oh, yeah.
Well, most of them would send me on a one-way international trip.
Well, after this, that might not be such a bad plan.
I know.
Yeah, get to a Scandinavian country and you'll have better healthcare. One way. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Gonna need it.
Oh, fantastic, John.
This is
All
really
right.
interesting, John. We really appreciate this.
Well, if everybody has any questions, you know how to reach me.
Oh, great.
I'll be more than happy to help.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, let's
All right.